Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm so wonderful. Good morning. Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving. You got a nice sunny day there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's like the perfect day for Thanksgiving. It's the perfect day for the parade to be back.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not windy, which is always a good thing for the balloons, just feels like a perfect pre-pandemic
No,
day.
it's so funny. We just skipped last year, right? In terms of just, yeah.
It's funny because I had a baby, and so in some ways there's
You
like a
can.
benchmark, right? There's like
Right.
something
Yeah.
that like is living and breathing and reminds me that like that year happened, but in my brain, in my mind, I'm like, did it happen though?
Mm,
When did it happen?
right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, I call my studio behind me a COVID baby, and I call Core Conversations a COVID baby as well, because if it wasn't for March of last year, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Oh yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So
right, yeah,
we wouldn't have had the time, the space, we wouldn't have seen this as a viable way to communicate. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't have been. You wouldn't have said yes because you wouldn't have known who this guy in Mississauga is. You know what I'm saying? Like, and not that that I'm famous by any means, but like, there wasn't that same visibility or exposure to
right.
what we're doing, right?
Right, right, right. I want to say that there's even, the sense of allowing yourself to have the time and the grace to explore something different than just whatever it is that you were doing before, right? You
Yes.
now carved out this new sense of time because you had it in a way that you
Yes.
never had it prior to COVID, and
Yes.
I keep encouraging people to kind of hold on to that for as long as they can, because I think that
Yes.
there's this
Wise.
push, right? I made the joke about going back to pre-pandemic parades and whatnot, but like
Mhm.
there is this push that I'm seeing happening with my clients and the powers that be, where they just want to go back to normal. But I feel like going
Yes.
back to normal means in a lot of ways tearing down all these boundaries that we set for ourselves, right? Where we
Hmm.
said, well, this
Hmm.
is my time and I'm going to be creative, or I'm going to spend time with my family, or I'm going to travel, or
Right.
I'm going to take naps because, why not, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's just as important as the travel piece.
It's
Exactly. Yeah.
absolutely important.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that people are getting that push now to like kind of go back to the other thing. And I don't know that the other thing was working. And I think that that's been a conversation that we've had over and over again, right? Was
Right.
that pre-pandemic lifestyle working if it meant that you had to be away from your family or had to
Hmm.
work for 70-hour weeks, right? Versus
Yes.
whatever it is that people are doing now, which, doesn't resemble that.
It's funny. That reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my clients, and he's like he does insurance and he's on the road a lot, and he does well enough that his wife stays home. And his wife would say at times, like, you don't understand. I'm home with the kids, and the blah blah blah, that I'm working so hard here. And they had that dialogue. And then when she went away and he was home with the kids for the week, he came out of that like, I'm sacrificing a lot when I go to work. You know what I mean? Like there's a sense
Right.
of, listen, I'm missing out on my kids growing up. I had a chance to walk my kids to school this week. And and pandemic's obviously a magnified version of that, where we realized that there were some things at home that we were missing, and is to move right back into, okay, I'm just going to work bell to bell at work and not come home till 10 o'clock at night again. What I was missing was seeing my kids grow up. What I
Right.
was missing was whatever, right? So yeah, I hear you on that. And even with this, with these core conversations, I wouldn't have never carved out from 9:30 to 11:30 5 days a week to do this. But now that I'm back in the studio and I have my clients and stuff, I still block that time out to do this and then go back to my real life. So there's a sense of finding, and for everyone in the chat too, think about like, what were the things you had from before that you missed that you're bringing back, and what are the things that you have now that you're just not going to let go of, and now we got to find a new center for all of those things, right?
Yeah, for sure. I found that a lot of what I was doing was just like saying yes a lot, and at times when I didn't want to say yes. I think that that
Mm-hmm.
happens a lot for entrepreneurs and for, instructors or fitness
Yep.
professionals in general, where you find
Mm-hmm.
yourself having this like 14-hour day where you're
Yep.
like, you have, you know, clients from like 7 till 12, but then you have like a 3 or 4 hour break and you're like, oh, I'll just work out and like treat
Right.
myself, right? You like,
Right.
you cloaked it in this other narrative that like, oh, well, then I have this block of time that I can like work out for 2 hours and then I can like treat myself to lunch and then I walk to the studio and I'll wait and then I have this last client. But I don't know that that was working either, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
I could go home and I can work out and I can make myself lunch, and
Mhm.
that would feel just as nice, right?
Right. Yes.
So it's interesting, like the narrative and the way that we're kind of, like you said, integrating what we were doing before, kind of like
Mhm.
pivoting what we were doing before to look a little bit different now for, you
Yes.
know, the current time.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember like when we had our first child too, like that was almost like I didn't have the language to say no a lot of times. So I ended up using having a kid as my excuse to get out of a lot of things. And it was a great excuse because no one would ever question, well, we have a newborn at home, so I have to leave early today. They'd be like,
Right.
oh, yeah, go spend some time with your kid. So that was my scapegoat. And I actually am so grateful that when I didn't have the courage to say no, that I could use my kid as an excuse to get out of stuff.
I actually use that
It's
for
gotta be real.
social interactions now because I'm like not trying to go back to like whatever it is that we were doing before. So friends
Yes.
will be like, let's go out and like do this thing. And I'm like, I can't because I have to stay home.
Yep.
And
Right.
like, I just don't want to be out in the streets. Like, I don't,
Like, yeah.
I'm good. I don't want to be where you are, but I'm going to blame it on my son because that's easier.
It's easier, exactly. Plus, you don't need my story, but I mean, and do you feel like that's the other side of that too? Now that I've gotten older or more mature or whatever it is, have more lived experience, I can just be like flat out, no.
Yes, yes, I enjoy saying no. I'm all about the
Yeah.
power of no. I preach that to everybody
Do
that
you?
owns a business. All I used to manage a Pilates studio at a big like luxury gym, and that was like one of my messages to all the new instructors because I would find that they would get in that rut that they felt bad saying no. But there's power behind that because it means that you're
Totally.
taking ownership and agency with your time, right? Like that's your time.
Mm,
If you don't feel comfortable, if it's not like a hell yes, like I want to be there, then it's a no. Hard stop, then it's a no. If you don't feel
yeah.
like encouraged and incentivized to be in a space with somebody, then that means
Mhm.
that you don't want to be there. And there's no reason that, there's no money in the world that should force you to feel like you need to be spending time with somebody that you don't want to spend time with at a time that you don't want to
Absolutely.
be there, right? Because
Right.
then, and quite frankly, especially in what we do, right? If you're honoring the space and like creating a safe
Mhm.
space, that's not going to be a safe space. That's going to be you having agita the entire time and being anxious and not
Mhm.
wanting to be with this person. And you're just going to be running through exercises because you don't want to be with this person, looking at the
Right.
clock, and you're going to be like, this is the longest 15 minutes I have ever had in my life. And all those vibes, right? All that frequency that you're like setting off, that person's going to pick up on it. And that person's going
Yeah.
to have a terrible time too. And maybe they don't come back. And then you're going to like roll into having a different experience where you're like, why didn't they like me? Why didn't they come back?
Mhm.
Because you were
Right.
buzzing at a weird frequency because you didn't want to be there anyway.
Right.
That wasn't your person. Like, it's okay. Somebody else is there for them. It doesn't have to be you.
Yes. Exactly. The other side to that was for me figuring out when to say yes.
Mm.
And for me to figure out that yes was say like, does that align with my vision?
Mhm.
Does that align with where I'm going, who I want to be, sort of question? So there will be times that it would be a courageous yes. Like, I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I have the time in my schedule. And 6 months ago, I said I want to do more public speaking. So if anything comes down the line where they're asking me to speak, I'm just going to say yes.
Yeah. I love
As
that.
scary as
Courageous
it
yes.
is, right?
A courageous
Right.
yes.
Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. A courageous
I
yes.
like that. Yeah. Yeah. What do you think?
Mm.
What is your vision? Or when you started this, what was your vision?
Well, and started what? Started these
I
like these
know
conversations,
these
like this.
conversations and like the
Yeah.
core conversations. And do you think that your vision has now changed because
Hmm.
the, you know, the time has changed and we're kind of going back to this other or pivoting into a new normal?
No, such a good question. I feel like my vision was to use this space to meet new people in the Pilates space, uh, and to find out, the man behind the brand, the woman behind the brand. I just knew that from being a personal trainer that there's people that would sign up with me because of what I do, but then they stay with me because of who I am,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I could fast track or expedite that process by having you in the space and hear you talk about having a newborn and work in New York City and having space in a Pilates, being a manager in a Pilates studio and stuff like that, I know that there's people who sign up with me because they know I have kids and I like classic cars and whatever. So it's like, you have a car, I have a car. You have a dog, I have a dog, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I figured like I wanted to have a space and a vision of a space where people could just get to see the person behind the name, the handle that they see on Instagram, right? So eventually I wanted to get to a place where all of these introductions and people collaborating, meeting would turn into speaking opportunities, chances to travel, places to go, places to teach, because I'm really passionate about, men in Pilates, teaching Pilates for athletes, just my lived experience in this Pilates space, having a greater platform for that as well. So it was one was just to amplify other voices, and two is for me to make those connections.
Yeah. Do you think that your vision has changed in the last 18 months? Has it in any way?
No, I think it's still on track. I think
Yeah.
it's still on track. I've had some speaking gigs, I've done some conferences, and I've met some people, and I've enjoyed all of that. I think I could have spent more energy on the podcast, making it more polished or trying to drive revenue with it, but that wasn't my focus.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at some point, I'm thinking maybe I could have made a more of a pivot and spent money to make it like, a Joe Rogan-esque podcast, but instead I just throw it out there because I think it's still life-giving. I think the words and the answers I get from people like you mean so much, right? So I think
Right.
that it's a content as opposed to the package, right? So
Right. Right. And I feel like it still allows you to share a bit of yourself, right? It's like I've been thinking a
yeah.
lot since I've had my son about legacy, right? And our
Hmm.
mortality and what that means for us.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we get this idea that like our legacy is going to be this like really grandiose things, and we're trying to like make sure that people know us, right? And like remember
Hmm.
our name, but that's not really it. I think that my understanding of what legacy is at this point, or having these conversations, to your point, right? Having these conversations, sharing our ideas, getting as many ideas out there as possible, getting as much of our
Yes.
knowledge in a shared space as possible, and letting
Yes.
one person walk away with that and holding
Hmm.
on to that in their DNA, and then sharing that with somebody else, right? Maybe they talk to
Yes.
100 people, and one person in their 100 people container walks away and then talks to
Hmm.
somebody else, right? And then they talk to 200 people, and then in their container
Yes.
two people walk away, right? And that's the
Right.
legacy, right? Because I don't expect for someone to remember my name. I'm not a Malcolm X, right? I'm not going to be remembered in that way, and that's okay, right? Even my
Hmm.
great grandchildren won't know my name, right? Chances are
Right.
I don't know who my great grandmother was. I don't know her name. I know stuff about her, but I don't
Hmm.
know her, right?
True.
But I'm sure there are
But you're
things that
living her
she did.
legacy. Yes.
Exactly, right? There are
Right.
things that she shared with her children, and they shared with, my grandmother, and then my grandmother shared things with me that I'm sharing with my son. And so even though he doesn't have a direct relationship with her the same way that I did, he is
Hmm.
going to be her. He is her, right? As
Yes.
he goes on to his life, and then he's going to be able to share that legacy. And I think that, you know, what I've gotten out of these conversations, watching you, and also putting myself out there and talking to other people, is that
Hmm.
that is the most important thing that we can do, especially in a
I
moment
think
like
so.
this,
I
right?
think
Is
so. Yeah.
because we don't own the knowledge that we have. We all learned everything that we know from somebody else, and it's up to
Yes.
us. Like we have a driven responsibility to share everything that we know with other
Yes.
people, right?
Right. Yeah.
And to
100%.
share our experiences, and to give people as much information as possible, right? Without charging them. It's not about money
Hmm.
in these conversations, right? Like to your point, like you
Right.
could have done a Joe Rogan thing, but you didn't, because it's
Hmm.
not about that,
Right.
right? It was
Right.
something, it's something bigger than that, right?
Thank you. That's exactly it. I mean, when you think about how big your vision is, yeah, that would have stifled it. That would have been too small if I ran after that, just that one channel. And to your point about legacy, there's a it's almost like there's two legacies that I'm chasing after. One is that professional legacy where the landscape of Pilates should look like this. If you're watching these conversations and you've seen the myriad of people who've passed through the space, that should change the way that you look at Pilates. And has nothing to do with me. You should be able to gather a nugget from all these different people and have your own brand of Pilates that is true to the essence of Pilates and the essence of who you are.
Right. Yeah.
And then the same thing with my kids, right? Like, and with my family and that legacy, to your point, 200 years from now, 50 years from now, 75 years from now, they might not know my name, but we'll have a legacy of men that are compassionate or fierce or tender or are hard workers or have a sense of ownership, or whatever it is that are your core principles
Mm-hmm.
that will run down the line. So I want people to run down the line of my business with a legacy and run down the line on a personal level with
Right.
certain things as well.
Which is such a beautiful thing if you really think about it, right? It's such a
Yep.
beautiful opportunity to share empathy, with people
Yes.
that you don't even know yet, people that you'll never know, right?
Right. Yeah.
And really that's the shift, right? If we're trying to make this bigger world shift and global shift, that's how you do it. If you want to
Yes.
impact and make the impact, that's how you do it. You live your highest self, right? You
Yes.
are the change, right? As they say, right?
Yeah.
You live that, and you emulate that for your kids or for your clients, or
Right.
and you connect who you are and what you believe in, your integrity, to that which you are doing, right? To uphold.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And I like the way too, Laura, that you say that about, like, whether there's 100 people and then 2 people run with the message, like that idea is exactly the same thing. And I think of it in that way, is that, like, I'm playing for an audience of 1 at any given point. Like, I'm not trying to do this so that 10,000 people hear it. I'm seeing it so that it just pierces 1 heart, 1 person, and from there they can take the message where it goes. So
yeah,
that's a different approach than saying, okay, I'm just going to stand here with a megaphone and hope that everyone hears my message at the same time and runs with it.
right. And not only should they take it, but they should make it their own, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
I think that's probably the harder thing, and that comes with maturity, I guess, right? And like time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
taking all that information in, especially if you're like newer to Pilates or newer to fitness. There's a lot of like, what am I doing? And I'm just like mimicking, right? I'm a parrot. I'm just going to say the things that I see other people do, and I'm going to copy these programs, and I'm going to run through the choreo, and I'm just going to like do this because I'm not sure of who I am yet.
Right.
Even though it's there, it's always there. Who you are.
Yep.
No, I think when I was when I was a younger instructor, right? I used to always talk about like finding my voice, but now I realize I always had my voice. I haven't changed.
Yes.
This was in me the entire time.
Yes.
I just hadn't connected with that part of myself yet. I hadn't honored that part of myself yet.
Honor. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes maturity, and it takes being in a safe enough headspace, right? There's a mindset of like, whoa, how am I going to connect to this higher self, or this higher version of myself that I don't even believe I am yet? There's a journey there, right? I have to like work on shedding a lot of this ego that makes me believe that I don't know that stuff, that that I'm not there yet, that I'm not worthy of the attention, or I'm not, I'm not the instructor. I'm not like them, right? I'm not like that person over there, but you are, because we all have the same information, and who you want to be is already inside of you, because you can see it. It's just that your ego gets in the way, and it's your overhead, and you believe that somebody else has to give you the permission when it's inside of you the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes. When like I could just say, okay, and thanks for joining us today. And
bye.
Yes, bye. Because Tasha talked about that yesterday, and the word she used was skill. Like you said, like vulnerability is a skill. Like she didn't use the word gift. She used the word skill. If it was a gift, I could sit back and just take it out of my pocket, like here it is. If it's a skill, that's something I'm going to have to hone and master and take with repetition and get competent with, get confident with it. All of that, right? And then I got to peel back the layers of wounds, and to peel back the layer of permission, and peel back that layer of competition and all these different things to land at, who I am and what that expression is, right? So that takes skill. Like that's work. That is work. And that takes putting your neck on the line sometimes and putting something out there and allowing people to challenge you on it so that you can dig your, square up, dig your heels in the sand and be like, hey, no, this is who I am. This is how I do it.
Right.
And here we are, right?
And you also have to then be comfortable with it being uncomfortable.
Yep.
Right. That feeling of plateauing or feeling like you're not progressing. You have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with the messy parts of it, because
Yes.
skills are not, and that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was saying in terms of honoring my clients and where they are, right?
Yes, yes.
I have to understand, and I had to grow to understand that my clients, just because I run them through exercises, right? The first couple of years, I was like, why can't I just get them into candlestick? why
Yes.
can't everyone just do this, right?
In
Because
7 easy steps, right?
7 easy steps to
Yeah.
getting stronger. Yeah, no, because things are not linear. No skill set is ever linear, right? You're never going to learn it in a straight line. It's going to be a lot of jagged ups and downs, and sometimes they're going to feel like they're really gung-ho and really into it, and then sometimes your clients are going to come in and they're going to be dealing with trauma, and they're going to be dealing with loss, and they're going to be dealing with
a sleepless
even
night.
a
It doesn't have
sleepless
to be
night.
complicated.
It could also be positive stuff, right? Like now they're pregnant. So like, no, they're not going to do candlestick, right? Like maybe they got a new job and that's great, but like now their focus is completely on that, and they're not listening to you when they get on the mat and you say, lift your right arm, and they lift their left leg. And it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong, right? And it's not a sign that they're incompetent. It's just a sign that they're a little distracted. So you need to meet them where they are, right?
Yes.
And in the same way, right, you need to meet yourself where you are. Some days you're going to be like, yes, I can get on this IG live and I'm like flowing and this is great and I want to have this conversation. I'm sure some days you wake up and you're like, I have to have a conversation today. And I did not sleep.
Right. Yeah.
Right? You're human. We're all human.
Yeah. And that's a real, I like that you brought that up, because like the sense that I feel like I'm doing what I'm called to do, what I'm skilled to do, what I'm comfortable doing, helps me in those times when I don't feel like having a conversation today, or I know it's going to be a difficult time, or I have no guests and I just want to be consistent for the sake of being consistent. Because I feel like I'm in my lane, it's almost like there's a grace that's there. And I've seen it a lot lately where I just come on here at 10 o'clock and then I have some fantastic people who just pop up in the chat and have conversations like I did earlier this week with a barber and an educator. And we had this fantastic talk that wasn't scripted. And I wasn't like, I had nothing planned. I'm just going to go and just be. I'm just going to be.
The power of be. I love that.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, I think that is something I've been thinking about a lot, is the difference between being motivated and consistent. Okay. And it sounds like that's similar to what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah, you may not have a guest that day. You might be tired. You might, whatever it is that might be distracting you, life, right? But you show up because this is your zone of genius. This is what you want to do. You might not be motivated that day, but you're consistent, right?
Yes.
And because you're consistent, the energy that you're putting out there is already flowing, right? And so it kind of draws you right back in, where like even on your worst of days, you're still buzzing at a frequency that's probably pretty high, because people are they're gonna help you, right? Your community is there. You've already put it out there that this is who you are, and this is your vision, and these are the conversations you want to have. And sometimes it's a tribe, right? Sometimes you have to be encouraged or motivated or helped by the people that are in your community.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw just in passing today, I was looking, just flying through, looking at Instagram and stuff like that. And someone had posted that, the saying that like marriage isn't the union of two strong people. It's two people who are taking turns being strong. Right. There's an exchange of strength, that reciprocating power that comes through marriage. I could talk marriage and family and relationships all day long. But it's the same thing here, right? Like when you're in that, I love how you said that zone of genius, like whatever it is that you're called to do, like you feel like there's times when there are people who are going to lift you up and give you that strength when you feel like your strength isn't there. And then there's times when I feel strong and I'm very intentional to lend my strength to people, to encourage people when I'm in that place. I don't just like hoard it. I'm giving it out everywhere, right? Like,
right.
Have it. So,
yeah, I mean, it's true. I watch The Office entirely too much. That's like one of my shows. But there's this episode where, the company might be shutting down. They're going bankrupt. and Michael Scott, you know, that's
Yes.
yeah, is playing
I've been
games,
watching it
right?
too. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, he's
Yeah.
playing like the whatever it is, like the clue type game that they were playing. And Jim is like, "Well, why are you playing this game?" But at the end he realizes, well, if, you know, the boat is sinking and you have kids on the boat, one of the parents, right, has to distract the children
Yes.
while the other one figures out how to get everybody to safety, right?
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
that's similar, right? Like if somebody is really distracted in the space and in their life and whatever, you know, here's this like small amount of time that you have with them where you can get them out of that, right, for a moment, and get them to breathe,
Yes.
get them to be, right?
Yes.
Just get comfortable being. It doesn't have to be something really fancy. They don't need to do anything really extravagant. They just have to
Right.
be, right? And they just have to feel
Right.
encouraged, and they need to be in a place that feels safe, right?
Yes.
And I think that you provide that, you know, and I think sometimes our community provides that for us, right? As professionals, sometimes again we walk into the space and maybe we had a bad day, right? And even right, because we've been showing up consistently, our clients sometimes gift us that, right?
Yes. Right.
Yeah, but just by them being there and them receiving us, right? They kind of share in that intimacy, and it's an exchange back and forth. And I think it's really important to like realize that, especially if we're working on a one-on-one basis with people, that exchange is so much more than just whatever service it is that you're providing, but it's this intimate moment that you have where you can really get to know somebody. It doesn't have to be personal, right? It doesn't have to like be the ins and outs of what's going on in their bedroom or something, right? But like, it, you know, you can get to know where this person is coming from, why they're really coming to you, because it rarely is just like because they want to do a really good 100.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Especially not in New York City. You know what I mean? Like most of these high performing people that are coming to me that only have this 1 hour a week to work out, it's rarely because they want to do the hundreds. It has nothing to do with that. They just need a moment, right?
Yes, an hour for themselves.
An hour for themselves where they get attention, someone listens to them. It has nothing to do with their kids, their job, right? And that's it. And sometimes it is just about being there on the mat and breathing. And maybe they just need to tell me about their week. I'm not a psychotherapist, right? But I'll listen. I'm not going to shut them up if they've had an especially stressful week.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's because I have to honor them, right? It's different if you're in a group class. Maybe you have to like
keep it moving. Yeah.
like, like this is not the time, right? But like if it's a one-on-one exchange, like that's part of your scope of practice, right? In order for that person to feel comfortable. Like I have clients that I've worked with for over 9 years now, like that. They've left the city. We're working on Zoom. They're in a different state. They're in a different country. This is not about the Pilates anymore, right? This is something deeper. This is a long-term relationship. Right. And it's me keeping them up in some way or exchanging that energy with them in a way, right? Like where they feel safe.
Absolutely.
And empowered, right?
Absolutely. And empowered. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. It's common. There's so much magic in one-on-ones or one-to-ones. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. So besides being a mom and a movement teacher, you're also doing some business coaching as well?
So I'm starting to dip my toe into business coaching. I've been mentoring a couple of people. I think, you know, I worked at, I told you, like a bigger gym for a while. I was doing management there. Part of it was, you know, the ins and out of running the business, which like, didn't really love. It's different. It's different when it's your business and like your money. You know what I mean?
And your vision.
When you're like, and your vision. And then when you're like trying to like corral like 5 or like 10 people to like have the same vision and then they don't want to do it. Like that part I like didn't love so much. But the one-on-ones, again, one-on-ones, I'm talking about the mindset and like building people up and allowing them to kind of explore what their
handle rejection and drive their business and be responsible.
Have these conversations and like show up, you know, and be consistent and like say yes and say no and all of that. I really love that and I really miss that. So I started mentoring a couple of people earlier this year to kind of see what it is that people are really craving. Because I don't, you know, there's so many of these like coaching programs that are out there that are like high ticket items. They're valuable. Like I don't want to like knock anybody's business, right? They're valuable. I've taken them, like they definitely are valuable. They have a lot of information, but I think that there needs to be a junction between like the task oriented stuff, like the business
Yes.
stuff, right? The masculine energy, so to speak. And then the like woo woo, kind of like feminine energy, like the mindset stuff, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's where people falter. That's where people get in their own way. They, you know,
Yes.
they get to a point where things are easy, or they get to a point where things are successful because it was easy. Like people followed them from wherever they were working, or whatever it
Yes.
is, right? They have their like core clients, and then they plateau and they can't figure out why. And a lot of that
Right.
is mindset. A lot of it is putting themselves out there, having these conversations. If nobody knows
Mm-hmm.
who you are, nobody knows who you are, right? Like, and that's how that works. And you have to put yourself out there in order to be successful if you want people to work with you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I am
Absolutely.
starting to carve out something that's a little bit business, a little bit woo woo, and it'll be like a small container. I'm also trying to figure out a way that I can uh, really support diversity in the space, because something
Okay.
that was really challenging for me when I first started the Pilates program was honestly just affording it. And I think that
Right.
right, that plays out more so in Pilates than I think it does in other modalities. Because I also have like NASM, which was, you know, eight
Yep.
hundred
Same.
dollars or something like that, and
Right.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
my Pilates was, you know, a lot
Couple
more.
grand. Yeah. Yeah.
And I had to do a work study. And had I not had that work study and also the support of my family, like I would not be having this conversation with you right now, quite frankly. Um,
Right.
and
Exactly.
you know, the same thing goes for these high ticket coaching items, or coaching programs. Like we're singling people out, or we're like disassociating certain parts of the community by simply charging, you know, 10 grand for something that I don't know needs to be that expensive.
Right.
And that's just my opinion. So I've been really trying to either figure out a way that I can have like a scholarship program for, you know, Black and Brown professionals. So I at least have somebody that I'm mentoring and sharing my information with, you know, pro bono, like just totally giving it out
Right.
there.
Yeah.
And also just trying to figure out like a way, like how can I, of course, support myself, right? I still have to like charge money,
You
right?
got a
Because this is
mouth to
still a
feed or a
business.
couple. Yeah.
I have a,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a, yeah, mouth to feed, right? But then also like, how do I honor the community,
Yes.
right? To make
That
sure that it's
is the
accessible.
question. Yeah, exactly. And I love camping on the accessible conversation for that very reason, because there's a sweet spot between making what we do accessible without devaluing what we do, while making sure that there's representation at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my conversation last Saturday, when I was a group from Brazil, and I was doing a talk on the Wonder Chair, the women that were in the room were all Pilates instructors who were trained in contemporary Pilates, so to speak. Some of them mat, and it's just a question of accessibility. Where is the closest place where classical Pilates was being taught? How much does it cost to get classical equipment to Brazil? You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like all these different things.
Interesting. Yeah.
It wasn't even like one barrier to entry. There was like nine.
Right.
But people wanted to learn Pilates and also wanted to understand the root supplies in classical. So it's not a question of whether classical is better or not. It's just that one wasn't even there if you were curious.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So then to your point right there, like I was like, my wife's here in the chat. I'm like, I want to go to Brazil. I want to go to Brazil. I've been talking about Brazil for like 3 days now, right? Because I'm like, everything's about Brazil, because you want to go and just give everything for free.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you get paid for it? How do you support yourself? How do you support the community? How do you get more people of color moving in that way? How do you push Pilates forward with people being informed by Contrology while also exploring and making the brand their own? My head is swirling with all those questions, that same as you.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's good. I think that's good that we can ask these questions, because before they weren't being asked. They were just like, okay,
Right.
let's get someone with blonde hair to be on the poster and to speak at every conference and to be on every magazine, and we'll call it a day and pat ourselves on the back because this is Pilates.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think the reason I had initially contacted you on Instagram is because you had posted a video talking about We Are Here, right? And I
Yes.
think it was one of the original or one of the initial conversations that you had around that, in talking about how there's a lot of focus on everything that's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and like all the anti-racism work in that respect, rather than honoring the fact that we are here, we exist. There are a lot of problems still, right? And there
Mm-hmm.
are things that I don't have the answers to. I'll put that out there right away. I don't have the answers. I don't have the solutions for these things, right? But
Right.
I do know that I am here. And I think that it's
Mm-hmm.
important for the representation to be seen, right? It's important for you to be
Yes.
seen. It's important for me to be seen. It's important for me to talk about my experience as somebody who didn't
Yes.
fit into my community, which was why I had the Pilates Relevant podcast. It was really
Yes.
important
That
for
was
me
great.
to be super raw, like,
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the fact that like there were like a list of items that were problematic. Like nobody looked like me, nobody had my body type, nobody wanted to
Yes.
work with me because I couldn't flow through the choreo the same way that they did, because they had
Right.
maybe 20 years of movement on me and I didn't. Um, but
And
it,
sorry, Laura,
in turn,
also, sorry, just jump in there. And also, like some, like from your podcast, I thought was powerful too, is that some people didn't even give you the dignity of declination, like to say, like, I'm sorry, we're like, they didn't even give you that piece, right? Like that alone is like not even the dignity to say thanks, but no thanks.
right. And that's problematic. That's a bigger systemic issue, right? And we know that, right?
Right.
When people say certain names or certain things on resumes, they just don't reach out. And that's a problem. And again, I don't have
Yes.
the solution to that, but that is something that exists. And there are, this resistance. There's resistance that we often have to work upstream against.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's part of my legacy, right? It's part of my responsibility to make some sort of pathway for people so that it's a
Good
little
stuff.
bit easier, right? Or if it isn't
Yes.
easier, right? Because I can't stop the resistance, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I can give you the tools that you need to break through that wall, right?
Yes.
And allow
Right.
you to understand, right? The woo woo, allow you to understand that you had that power all the time. I didn't really do anything for you. I'm the Siri on your phone. You asked me a
Yes.
question, I gave you the answer, right? I'm
Yep.
just giving you the toolbox, right? So that you can like go about
Mm-hmm.
your business and know that you have a place there. You should have been there the whole time.
Yes.
We both should have been here the whole time. People need to know that we exist, right?
Yes.
And there needs to be a
Yes.
space for us. Period. Yeah.
Period. So, how would you respond to that if that was to happen to you tomorrow? If you were to walk into a studio and they were to give you some of those lines you got then, like what would actually be Laura's response to that person? Real talk.
Now,
Now.
it probably wouldn't. I don't know. you know,
You
like
don't want to
my
go
initial,
there. You don't even access
exactly.
that
Like
person.
my initial reaction may not be positive. But ultimately I'm still a businesswoman, right? And the most important thing is I can't just react. I can't just react, right?
You can't just burn the
Um,
building down.
can't just burn the building down, but I can let people know, right? And that's the power of social media that we have that we
Yep.
didn't have before, right? That's how people know who I am now, right? Is that I've come out here. So if I walked into a space and that was the way that they reacted to me, people are going to know. People would know. And I
Yep.
make sure all the right people knew so that they could also scream it from the top of their mountains, right?
Yes.
On
Right.
their megaphones, because there are people that are louder than me, right? And that's their business and that's what they're really good at. I'd let them know
Yes.
because that's
Yep.
what needs to happen. We need to call people out for doing
Yes.
disservice to the
Right.
community.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason, and I said this on the podcast, there's no reason why in New York City I should be walking into any studio, Pilates or otherwise, and not see a single person that looks like they are from New York City. This is a diverse city, right?
Yes.
There's no reason why everybody should look the same in your studio,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
And I'm not even going to say the obvious, but like, there's no reason why everybody should look the same with the same thigh gap and same everything. I just, no, that's preposterous. There's no reason. And you
Right.
need to do better, right? And I don't know how you do better other than just doing better.
Well, you do better.
Right.
I see both of us have a very positive outlook on that. Like that's just even the way that we're talking, like we're spinning it to the positive instead of staying in this angry black man or angry black woman space.
Right.
So even if something appears like it might be performative, like I'm the only I'm the token Black person in a space, I will be so intentional with that space, and I will make it such a welcoming and belonging space. I will carry that with a sense of with such a sense of leadership and bring more people into it, that even if you started with the wrong motive, they would see the benefit of having representation in their space.
I think that that's more challenging than meets the eye, though. You know what I
It
mean?
is. It is. It
Because
is. It is.
I think that the part, and not to like discredit what you're saying at
Mhm.
all, but I think the part that I always get stuck on is, again, the safety of that space for us, because
Right.
there are real life things, real life experiences, from my hair down to my body shape, that are going to affect my relationship with just being on the mat, right? When
Yes.
I had
Yeah.
an afro and the back of my head would, would get all squished up by afro, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had to, and I'm real delicately trying to pick out my curls,
Right.
right? Like, I don't need you asking me to touch my hair, and I don't need to have a whole conversation about my hair.
Hmm.
I know you're curious, but like,
Right.
there's better ways to do that, other than
Yes.
like reaching out and being like, oh, look, this is novelty,
Hmm.
right? Because that may
Right.
not make me feel comfortable,
Right.
right? What's more
Yes.
comfortable to me is to point out the obvious, like, oh, Joseph wasn't thinking about black hair when he created all these exercises laying down on this mat here.
Right.
Let's state the obvious, right?
Yeah. Right.
And you know, there are cultural experiences that I'm gonna have, that I'm gonna talk about, that I want to be able to talk about, right? That
Hmm.
you may not know of or have heard of, and I want
Hmm.
to be able to talk about those safely, right? The way, you know,
Yes.
I'm married into a Puerto Rican family. I want to be able to talk about the things that we do for Christmas safely and feel like I
Hmm.
can have that conversation, right? And I
Yes.
think that
Right.
sometimes that's the bit that can be challenging if you're the only
It
person
is.
there, is that
Yeah.
you can create that safety in a
Hmm.
way, right? You can show up and try to be as welcoming as you can be, but the
Yeah.
other people there also have to want to learn about you, right? And your,
Yes.
like, this is what we do for this holiday. What do you do, right?
What do you
And
do? Yes.
yeah, like, wow, you know, your hair is really beautiful. I've never seen hair like that before. I've never seen dreadlocks. Like, how do you take care of it? I'm really curious, right? Which is a lot nicer than being like, wow, look at your hair.
Hmm. Right. Yes.
Look at my hair.
Right. Yes.
And point me out now and make me feel like you're staring at me, right? Like that's you're like,
Right.
you see what I'm saying? Like, there's
I do. I
moments,
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
people are like, oh, look at that booty, hoochie mama. That's problematic. That's problematic.
Is
That
that
right there.
problematic, really? Yeah.
Like, I don't know you like
Yeah.
that. We're coworkers. We're
Right.
cohorts. Like, that's not,
Right.
unless we like are going to the bar after and like that's our relationship. That's not. I don't. We don't know. I'm gonna stop you right
Boundaries.
there. Boundaries, right? And
Yes.
safe places, because I don't need you
Hmm.
pointing out my body type either.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I've been in spaces where I've had to be like what I just said a minute ago, and I agree with you that it becomes uncomfortable and it's not safe for people, all those different things. But as a business coach, as you are right now, as a leader, as you are right now, teacher, and been in management positions, we are leaders. And there is, I don't want to toss around the word privilege lightly, but we can lean into our privilege as being the one person there to dictate what that space is going to be like for those who come after us.
No, I agree. I agree.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's tough, it's uncomfortable. And there's days I'm like, I don't want to be a leader today. I don't want to have to absorb this. I don't want to take the first arrows today. Like, but that's part of being a leader sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Sucks, but
It sure does.
we are here.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You know, I think that you do assume a certain amount of responsibility when you decide that you are going to step into a role of leadership. You know, and not just responsibility in terms of tasks, but responsibilities,
Nope.
to your point, right? Of having to take some of the hits and like teach people that, like, that's not appropriate. I'm gonna need you not to do that again, so that
Yes.
when the next person comes behind you, they don't do it to
Yes.
that person as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This I'm loving this book. I actually have it like ready for any conversation I want to bring it into. Ian Williams, I'm still working on getting him on my show at some point. Disorientation and being black in the world, and he looks at being black from the perspective of being living in Trinidad, where it's all black, in
Mm-hmm.
Canada, where it's diverse, and then being in the U.S., where black in the U.S. is a different lived experience than black in Canada. And he talks about that disorientation, that moment when we're confronted with our race in those like, can I touch your hair moments, sort of thing, where it's like, what do we do with that? And that's a leadership piece that I've been kind of leaning into a little bit, is to say, okay, I can address this in a way where you can feel bad for doing that, or I can address this in a way of saying like, hey, just a heads up, I'm talking to you about this right now, but the next person that comes along is going to snap on you if you do that. So drop that, maybe ask some different questions. You know what I mean? Like, so you empower
Right.
people. And so there's a sense like, I've been just thinking about that. Like, we're carrying this for the people after us in so many different ways. Like, we're leaders in that way, going into these unsafe places and making them safe.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that the challenge is figuring out language that isn't confrontational
Right.
when somebody confronts you with something that feels unsafe or feels, I don't want to say dangerous, but feels, like they've
No, dangerous is safe. Dangerous is a good word.
right, that they've
You know what I mean?
treaded past the point of boundaries, right?
Yes. Yep.
Um, or even, I recently went to go see Hamilton, and part of the thing that was really exciting for me was seeing black and brown, you know, a whole entire cast, like a narrative,
Yes.
that we've only ever seen with white faces, now completely cast in black and brown,
Yes.
choreography. It was just like, I mean, it felt so, even before I went to go see the show, it just felt so, I felt like honored to be able to go there. Because
Yes.
I had never experienced anything like that. And I shared that with a couple of my clients. And it was interesting to see their perspective, right, as white
Mm.
individuals, that they had never thought about movies and how that can affect us, right? How that
Yes.
affects, like, always seeing the narrative being
Hmm.
played out in a certain way. And that
Yes.
if we just had these opportunities where Alexander Hamilton is, being played by a Puerto Rican or by whoever,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Hmm.
and you know, it makes things feel a lot more accessible, or it made me feel special, right? I felt like, wow,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
oh, this feels so good, right?
It feels
Um,
good. Yes.
and then I
Yeah.
brought up, Us and Get Out, right? And like the horror genre, and the big joke being that the black character usually gets killed off
That's
first.
first.
And
Yeah.
now you have like this entire narrative where the entire story is built around black characters. And it was interesting because every single one of them was like, huh, do they always get killed off first? And I was like, yeah, this is like a stereotype, but a ironic, like, bad joke. Like, it always
Yeah.
happens. And like,
Right.
that's
Right.
why it's so important to have those stories. And it was so interesting that they like had no relationship with that. They had no
Yeah.
idea that that was something that happened. And because
Right.
they're
Yes.
so used to just seeing the characters the way that they are, right? There's this
Yep.
whole controversy with Idris Elba being 007, and they may or may not cast him or whatever it is. And they're like, well, why not? I was like, do I need to say the obvious?
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, I can't believe that. I'm like, yeah, this is a real thing that
It's a
happens
real thing.
over and over
Yeah.
and over again, and I want my son to grow up in a place or in a world where he sees people that look like him and look like his
Hmm.
mom and look like his dad, that are playing all sorts of different characters, because that's important for him to see that the world looks like him, right? Not that the
Yes.
world always looks a certain way,
Like them.
like them.
The other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just true. It's true. It feels good. That representation piece feels really good to me when I could see myself in different roles in different places, whether it's theater or politics or sport or whatever the arena is,
Right.
right? Like, it just feels good, right? So, um, yeah, just try to highlight that as much as I can. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked for, like, it's 11 o'clock now, and I didn't even
I
get to
know.
I actually didn't even get a chance to ask you how you even found Pilates. Like, like that's we
Oh,
even talked about.
a totally happenstance. So I graduated college and was looking for a job, and one of the first jobs that I got was managing a Pilates studio
Okay.
because I went to school for business and I had a specialty in small business management.
Oh,
So I'm one
wow,
of the
cool.
like rare people that like actually does
Actually
the
has a
thing,
business.
actually
Yeah.
does the thing that they went to school for because they actually
Right.
enjoy it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
I know, it's crazy.
Great.
I like numbers. I'm one of those people. But like, yeah, and I had never heard of Pilates before. Didn't know what it was. Took the job. Was there for like a month, and the owner was like, "You need to start doing Pilates because you're here selling it and
Yeah.
managing it." And I was like, yeah, sure. Because I could like see, everybody outside the office on the reformers moving, on their backs, lying down. I was like, that looks so easy. And then I
Yeah.
was like, wow, this is super challenging. And clearly I have no idea what's going on in my body. I wasn't a mover. I wasn't really exercising. I think the only time I exercised was between the months of like January and March when I'd get like a gym membership. And then I'd be like, I didn't know what I was doing. I go on the treadmill,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
I'd be like, I don't like this anymore.
Mhm.
So it kind of fell into my lap, and it was a happy blessing. And after a couple of years, I left and decided I wanted to be like one of these happy instructors that I was seeing getting paid way more than I was getting paid and seemingly working a lot less. I didn't really
Right.
understand the politics of it at the time, but
But now you do.
now I understand. Yeah, yeah. But it's such an amazing, like I said, a happy blessing, right? Because
Mhm.
in retrospect now, I realized because I wasn't moving and didn't have that body awareness, I mean, that would have been problematic, right? And we see that a lot with people who
Yes.
aren't movers, that are beginner clients that come in, who have never moved. They have no body awareness. They have a lot of generalized pain.
Yes.
They normalize it. I had normalized it. And then there's
Mhm.
also the mind aspect. Like I was full of anxiety. Um, I was having panic attacks, and Pilates gave me that opportunity to be right and be still.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm happy to say that, Pilates changed my life, not just in terms of business and my career, but it gave me this opportunity to connect to myself in a way, not just physically, but like mentally that I don't know would have came to me another
When I
way.
found it. Yeah, exactly. Or yeah, you might have found it, but who knows how or where or
Who
when.
knows how? And I'm happy that this is the way I found it because,
Yes.
it just, it I do think that it's a blessing, and it's
Mhm.
poured over right into other cups because now, I was able to have a complete business while we were in the pandemic. I
Yes.
retained like 85% of my business. I didn't have to get on the subway while I was pregnant because of the pandemic, which was amazing. Or I wasn't
Yes.
going anywhere. My commute was from like the bedroom to the other bedroom, which was
Right.
great.
Yes.
It gave me all this time with my son, right? And I have this, like to your point, privilege as a leader, right? Like I have this privilege where I could say, no, I'm not going to work these days. I'm not going to work
Hmm.
these hours. And I'm going to spend my afternoons with my son. And that's what I do, right? And
That's
that's
great.
a happy blessing, right? The trickle down effect of me finding Pilates is that I have full agency over my life and my
Your life. Yeah.
family and the relationships that I have with my family. Yeah, I know,
Good
right?
stuff. Yeah. No,
How
we're
did you get
blessed.
into Pilates though? Because
Uh,
you said you started in fitness, but then you segued
yeah.
into Pilates.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I have a segue even before that segue where I was in social work, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, before that segue, I was taking kids to the gym while I was a social worker and realized I was
Oh,
having better conversations with kids over the bench press than in a counseling setting,
right,
right? So then from there, when a colleague of mine was leaving fitness, I basically inherited her book of business as a personal trainer. And then fast forward a few years, well, actually, I did Pilates a couple of times and it really helped my back when I was playing football. And then when I got into a big box gym setting, I had an opportunity to do my Pilates cert. And I looked around and realized there was no guys doing Pilates and there was definitely no brothers doing Pilates.
mm,
Right. So like now's my chance to kind of get the corner on the market because I have a different skill set, another tool in my toolbox that the other personal trainers didn't have.
right,
And then over the years doing that, I got into apprenticeship program, did study, just dove deep on learning the classical method, as well as all just putting together all the stuff I learned before, and just piecing together this sport conditioning Pilates for men brand where I'm just like real men do Pilates, and I want to challenge
right.
men to think about how that could be a positive impact for them in their life, work, business, sport. Yeah, so yeah, it's the same thing, right? Just it segues, and then I'm circling back around full circle to the community thing, and running for city council next year, right?
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. So and that's it. Just I'm
Yeah.
just so passionate about. I've lived in this area for like 40 years, and I
Okay, yeah.
want to be like even in the fitness thing, I'm always giving back and thinking about how do we make it accessible? How do we give back to our community? And yeah, and there's an intersection of fitness and race and everything, like we just talked about for the last hour. Like it's all connected.
It's all connected. And I think that just again, putting what we know out there in any capacity, and sharing what we know, sharing our knowledge is just a responsibility at this point.
Absolutely.
And I think that's how we help to get to the communities that need us the most, right? Is like figure out a way that we can get our knowledge just out there so people can hear us and people can learn about their bodies or learn about themselves, right, in some way, or learn
Yes.
about breathing, learning about just like taking a walk, just like it's
Right.
okay to just go outside and take a walk
Yes.
as long as
Yep.
it's safe, in your neighborhood, of course, right? But
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've had in the last like 6 months trying to figure out this
Mhm.
like business coaching is like I need to just be able to put my knowledge out there and know that I don't
Yes.
own it, right? And that
Mhm.
I
Love that.
have no control over that, right? Like that's just information that was given and shared with me, and that
Yes.
I need to then share it back with the community, so that people feel uplifted and people feel healthy. People feel like
Yes.
they have options, right? People feel like they are empowered, um,
Empowered. Absolutely.
right? It's not
Yeah.
always about the paycheck. Sometimes it's just about putting yourself out there so that people know hard stuff.
Yeah.
They just know. They know stuff.
They just know. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just know. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we
Yeah.
do a round two on this?
I would love that.
Okay. Let's
Yeah.
let's keep this conversation going because
I know.
this is all
Otherwise, we're
good
never
stuff.
going to stop. I can hear my
I
kid
know.
like
I just
screaming. There's like a terrace door right here, and he's just like, ah.
yes. All right. So before the time bomb goes off, we'll end it here. And we'll continue that conversation because there's so many good things in that. Just even in that last piece that I'm like sitting on my hands, like, okay, all right, okay, next time, yes,
Next time. Oh, it was
next
so
time.
lovely talking to you. You're such a beautiful soul.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Likewise, really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone else who joined us here too, all of your people. Buddy Lee Jump Rose, but I would love to get Buddy Lee in here and have a conversation with him. I see Debbie Robbins, Ed was in here earlier. So many amazing souls. Jamie, looking forward to chatting with you tomorrow as well. All right,
All right.
my friend, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Bye.
right, take care. Bye.